Hi, I'm Moju, a solutions architect at Amazon Web Services. In this video, I'm excited to announce significant updates to resource control policies, or RCPs, including expansion to AWS GovCloud regions and support for additional AWS services. These updates give you even more control over your AWS resources. So let's dive in and see what's new. On the agenda today, I'll give you a quick overview of resource control policies and walk you through the benefits of using RCPs in your AWS organization. Then I will go over the two major updates: expansion to AWS GovCloud regions and support for Amazon Elastic Container Registry and Amazon OpenSearch Serverless services. I will also give you a quick demonstration of how you can use RCPs to prevent external identities from accessing your ECR registries. Finally, I'll leave you with some helpful documentation to get started. RCPs are a new authorization policy managed in AWS organizations. They are a type of preventative control that helps you establish a data perimeter in your AWS environment and restrict external access to resources at scale. For example, you can restrict access to S3 buckets so that they can only be accessed by principals that belong to your organization. RCPs can be applied at an organization root, at an OU, or at the member account level. RCPs support delegated administration and are available to AWS customers at no additional cost. RCPs provide a centralized governance mechanism to security teams that access to AWS resources conforms to your organization's access control guidelines. Next, customers can enforce a consistent access control on resources in their AWS organization and at scale. For example, to prevent potential attackers from manipulating network traffic, you can deploy an organization wide RCP that denies access to your S3 buckets if the connection to the S3 bucket is not over a HTTPS or a TLS encrypted channel. This provides developers with more freedom to deploy applications while a centralized security team focuses on enforcing a baseline security standard across the organization. I've got some great news for our government and public sector customers, as RCPs are now available in AWS GovCloud regions. AWS GovCloud is an isolated US sovereign region that delivers efficient innovation for customers with elevated compliance needs. With the availability of RCPs in AWS GovCloud, government and public sector customers can now enforce organization wide preventative controls while providing developers with more freedom to deploy applications. Oh, and the good news keeps pouring in. Today, I'm also excited to announce the RCP support for Amazon Elastic Container Registry and Amazon OpenSearch Serverless services across all commercial and US GovCloud regions. For more information on the list of services that support RCP, please pause the video at this point and feel free to scan the QR code to learn more. Now let's take a look at some scenarios where you can use RCPs to apply organization-wide preventative controls across these two services. To dive deeper into what RCPs can do for you, let's take a look at this example. Here, on the left-hand side, I have an AWS organization structure with accounts A and B. In this use case, I would like to prevent external identities that are not part of my AWS organization from accessing the Amazon ECR registry. Without RCPs, you would have to apply a resource-based policy to each registry in order to enforce these preventative controls. While this works, it is not a scalable solution for security teams that want centralized preventative controls while giving developers the freedom to build applications in a scalable and secure manner. This is where RCPs address the requirement in a scalable fashion. On the right-hand side, you see a resource control policy that is attached at the organization level. And once applied, even if individual accounts or resources have defined overly permissive resource-based policy, for example, The resource-based policy for the ECR registry grants access to an external principal. Access is still denied by the resource control policies that were applied at the organization level. Similarly, in this example, to prevent potential attackers from manipulating network traffic, you can deploy an organization-wide RCP that denies access to your OpenSearch dashboards if the connection to Amazon OpenSearch Serverless is not made over an encrypted HTTPS or TLS channel. For more examples of using RCPs to enforce preventative access controls across your AWS organization, please pause the video at this point and scan the QR code on your screen to learn more. Let's switch over to the demonstration section of the video. As part of my demo, I have a corporate AWS organization. I have my management account, I have a member account, and within the member account, I have created a private registry. I've attached a resource-based policy to my private registry, and I'm giving my external user access to make a couple of API calls. Since I have the resource-based policy that gives external user access to my private registry, we will see that by running the CLI commands, they are able to view the contents of my private registry. Then I will log in as a security administrator into my management account of the AWS organization. And then I will create a resource control policy, RCP, that will deny access to the external users since they are not part of my AWS organization. Following this, I will once again run the CLI command, and that's when we will see that the external user has been blocked from accessing my private registry. All right, now let's switch over to the AWS Management Console and see how this plays out. Okay, I am inside the AWS Management Console, and within the AWS Management Console, I am accessing the Amazon Elastic Container Registry service. Within that, I am looking at the private repositories that exist in my member account. Additionally, I have also given external user access to my private repository so that they're able to run a couple of CLI commands. You can view that by clicking on permissions and then click on edit JSON policy. And these are the permissions that my external user currently has. So now let's log in as this external user and see if we are able to run CLI commands and view the content of this private repository. Okay, I'm logged in to the Cloud Shell environment for my external user that is not part of the AWS organization, and I'm ready to run the AWS ECR describe repositories command. Running this command gives me access or visibility into the contents of the private repository that belong to a different organization. So now we will use resource control policy to block this access and come back and run this command again. I am logged into the management account of my AWS organization. Within the management account of my AWS organization, I've gone into AWS organization service, and then inside that there is resource control policies. I'll select resource control policy, and within resource control policy, I've created an RCP demo for ECR customer managed policy. And if I click on the contents of that policy, you can see that the contents clearly state that we are denying access to any user that is not part of our AWS organization through this conditional block. The next step of this process is to attach this RCP to a AWS account or an OU. For that, we will click on targets, we'll click on attach, I'll scroll down, I'll look for the AWS account. This is the AWS account where I have my ECR repositories created. I'll click on attach policy, and you can see that the policy has been attached. Now we will go back to the Cloud Shell environment of my external user and try to run the same commands that we were able to successfully run previously. All right, I'm back inside the Cloud Shell environment of my external user, and I'll try to run the same command that I ran a couple minutes ago and was able to view the contents of my private registry inside the AWS organization. I click on enter, and as you can see, it now says that I have an explicit deny in a resource control policy because of which I am currently getting access denied exception. This concludes our demonstration, and as you can see, you can now deny external users from accessing ECR registries if they are not part of the AWS organization using resource control policy. Let's summarize what we learned from this video. I gave you an overview of RCPs and walked you through the benefits of using RCPs in your AWS organization. Then, I went over two major updates: expansion to AWS GovCloud regions and support for additional AWS services. Last, I also gave you a quick demo of how you can use RCPs to prevent external identities from accessing your ECR registries. Now that you have seen how easy it is to enable RCPs for your AWS resources, please feel free to pause the video at this point, scan the QR codes, and learn more about resource control policies. Thank you.